This program, while curated to help you improve your health, contains general advice and should not replace the individual advice of your medical practitioner.
We continue to accept false mythology about our biology. We should not accept the suffering of our period as quote unquote part of being a woman. We equate perfection with being able to maintain sameness. When we look at it through the lens of the statistic that 67% of women are sexually unsatisfied, that to me is at a crisis level. I always joke when people ask me, like, what supplement would you take to a deserted island? I would say my clitoris and some lube.
In life, it's normal to have ups and downs. But what do we do when we get stuck? I've always been fascinated by the healing journey. Why do some people get better while others fail to make the shift? Welcome to the Season 2 Expert Series, where you'll meet 24 of the world's leaders in health discussing their passions and what it takes to make a shift.
We tend to be our harshest critics.
We are more than the muscle and bones in our body.
Whoa, that's so opposite of what I was taught growing up.
I would like a call to arms for women to know that their intuition isn't lying to them.
I'm Katherine Maslen, and this is The Shift. Hi, I'm Katherine Maslen, naturopath, author, and host of The Shift. In the Expert Series, we share the insight, stories, and expertise of each of our amazing experts. We're talking doctors, authors, naturopaths, researchers, and thought leaders. You may have heard them on Season 2 of The Shift, where we took snippets of these interviews to put them together in the series for you. If you haven't listened to Season 2 yet, I'd highly recommend checking out Episode 1, which will give you an overview of what constitutes women's hormonal health and a sneak peek into the series. We'll provide a link in the show notes. In this episode of The Shift, we have Alisa Vitti. Alisa is a women's hormone and functional nutrition expert and a pioneer in female biohacking and femtech. Through her company, FLO Living, she's changing the narrative for women's hormonal and menstrual healthcare worldwide. She's also the creator of the MyFLO Period Tracker app, a really handy tool for cycle tracking. And she's the author of 2 best-selling books, Woman Code and In the Flow. Alisa has been featured in the New York Times, Vogue, Harper's, Bazaar, and much, much more. She's a course instructor for Mind Body Green and on the Council for Well and Good. There is so much gold in this episode, particularly for women, but I really think that men need to understand this stuff too. Listen out for how to biohack your cycle, what PMS can mean, and more. Let's jump in. Alisa Vitti, thank you so much for joining me on The Shift today. Just before we get started, could you please tell me who is Alisa Vitti and what brought you to be doing what you're doing today?
So, well, gosh, who am I? I'm a functional nutrition and women's hormone health expert. I am an author. I'm an entrepreneur who has built a platform called FLO Living that is on a mission to disrupt and improve hormonal health care for menstruating women. I'm a mom. I am somebody who just deeply, deeply cares about making the world a more inclusive and healthy place for women.
Tell me, why is women's health so important to you?
Well, I had always been passionate about it. I think I got turned on to it in 6th grade. It was the sex ed class where we learned about menstruation for the first time. And you know, God bless my parents, they never told me about it. And so when I came to it, and because I was also raised in an immigrant family, I didn't pick up any of the cultural norms about how to feel or think about being a woman or having a period. I was just left to explore and form my own opinions. And so when I first heard about menstruation, I was so excited. I thought, this is literally the best thing ever. I am so lucky to be a woman. And I remember turning my head from side to side, like psychically sending messages to my female classmates, like, can you believe this? It's so cool. And they're all looking and obviously feeling the extreme opposite of what I'm feeling. And I couldn't quite figure out why that was. And later that day, I started a period club. And some would argue I have never stopped being the president of said period club. But then fast forward, I ironically did not get my period until I was a few months away from 16. And between the ages of 12 and 22, when everybody else was really menstruating on a regular basis, I only got my cycle 5 times, a couple of which were chemically induced with synthetic progesterone. And I went to doctor after doctor looking for explanations, because it wasn't just that my cycle was missing. I was also struggling with weight gain and severe acne, mood issues, concentration issues. And despite all this, still loving the whole concept of cycles, and decided that I would become an OBGYN. I was at Johns Hopkins University, and I finally, in an obstetrics journal, because I was trying to figure out what was wrong with me, discovered that I, in fact, had polycystic ovarian syndrome, worked with my physician to confirm that diagnosis. And then that was really the sort of defining moment, the career defining moment, where, I was presented with what the conventional model offers to women with hormonal issues, which was nothing, basically. I could take synthetic birth control, which she admitted would not fix or cure anything that was wrong with me. And that I would also have to then agree to take more and more medications as my symptoms progressively got worse over the years, including, having to use IVF for fertility and all of that, and being at greater risk for heart disease, cancer, diabetes, that kind of stuff. And I just, in that moment, really heard my body, speak to me saying, that's not your future. So I just opened my mouth and repeated that to her. And she looked at me like, okay, so what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know, but I'm going to take my really expensively trained mind and go figure it out. And that's what I proceeded to do, and put together what eventually became the FLO protocol, which I wrote about in my first book, Woman Code, which I used in the first decade of my practice in Manhattan, seeing clients one-on-one. And obviously it was a remarkable experience to watch my body transform under proper care and feeding of my endocrine system and hormones, and to reverse all of my symptoms. I was over 200 pounds. I don't know what that is in kilos, unfortunately, but I was obese for my frame, and, lost 60 pounds. My acne went away. My cycle came back. My moods improved. It was a complete reality change in terms of my quality of life. And I promised myself that I would then build a platform to help every woman dealing with hormonal issues where conventional medicine fails them, to have the resources, the tools, the programs, and the products to make navigating hormonal challenges easy and accessible.
What a remarkable story. One of the things that you were saying was, when you're in that doctor's office, that decision, no, that's not my future. Like, that's not what I'm going to do. But like you, what I've observed over the years is so many clients that have come in and gone, well, I have PCOS, so I'm probably going to have trouble getting pregnant, or I have this and this is my reality, and I feel like there's such a power in words, and doctors, sometimes putting these hard lines for patients in that can really impact their trajectory of where they go. Is that something that you've observed as well?
I think you have to be, not just in the medical setting, everywhere as a woman, you have to be very mindful of what you allow into your life, your thinking, your belief system. You have to curate really carefully what images you look at. I remember at a certain point when I was losing weight, organically from balancing my hormones, I was struggling with a bit of body dysmorphia just because I had been so overweight. It was still hard for me to see myself properly. So I just realized, I don't know exactly how I realized this, but I just said, okay, I'm just not going to look at images of women. I'm not going to buy fashion magazines. I'm not going to do that to myself for a while. And I'm telling you, within a few months, I was just able to really look at myself in such a positive way and really see myself the way that I actually looked. And so that began a little game that I would just have been playing over the years of like, well, what do I want to let into my world? What ideas, what images, what belief systems, what works to empower me and increase my sovereignty and autonomy and make me feel like I have agency? And what are the things that make me feel negative, self-critical, or like a victim? those are the things I want to actively keep out. And I want to be very selective and curate just the best influences for myself. I think the messaging that young girls get, really from the beginning, that their bodies are there to be an ongoing project, to decorate, to work on, to improve. That's a very different inculcation than what little boys receive, from the beginning. They really pick up from the ether, from the culture, that their bodies are tools to help them master their lives. And it's the point of pride. It's something you take seriously. You take care of yourself and you use it to be your best self and express the full potential of yourself.
Why have people become so grossed out about periods?
We can go all the way back to sort of biblical references and then sort of how that trickles out to major institutions of social learning. I think that that's a piece of the story. I think the bigger piece of the story that, and there's not much we can do about the past. The past it's in the past, right? What I like to focus on instead, it's the fact that we continue to accept false mythology about our biology. And we also are completely underserved during pubescence about getting a proper education about what's going on. And so we're often blindsided by our period, or we're traumatized by it in some way. And that trauma is held in the body, in the psychology, and it creates a situation where you begin to feel at conflict with yourself. And one of the ways that that can manifest is by feeling grossed out, let's say, with your own biology and your own blood. And of course, then how the past has influenced our cultural narrative is that we all feel like it's this taboo subject, and that it's normal to retain the belief that it's taboo and gross, neither of which are true, but also how each of us today don't challenge what we're being told enough.
Absolutely. And I think it's also a bit of lack of education for these young women, knowing what is it, what's going on with their bodies. So let's talk a bit about that. Can you walk me through what a healthy menstrual cycle is?
In a healthy menstrual cycle, you want to look for color of the bleed, texture, regularity of the cycle, length of the flow. These are powerful biomarkers and biofeedback that your body's presenting to you every month in that phase of the cycle of the bleed. Each phase of your cycle has 4 healthy phases: follicular phase, where the eggs are developing on the ovary; ovulatory phase, where one of them reaches full maturity and travels down the fallopian tube; the luteal phase, where the body manufactures the endometrial lining and holds it in place; and then the bleeding phase, where the lining is released. Each of those phases has optimal hormonal ratios. And each of those phases, when those ratios are not optimal, have common symptom patterns. And at each of these weeks of your cycle, watching and monitoring what your symptom burden looks like and your symptom pattern is one of the best ways for you to biohack your health as a woman, to take this information in and not flush it down the toilet without looking. A couple of years ago, I made national and feminist history by being the first human to go on national television and use simulated menstrual blood to explain what a healthy cycle should look like during the bleeding phase and what it could mean hormonally when it's, the wrong color or the wrong texture. And I think it's just something that we should all know and keep in mind that in 2015, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists decreed that your period should be considered your 5th vital sign. And just so that we put that into context, your other 4 vital signs are the things they take when you go to the emergency room, right? Your blood pressure, your temperature, especially in our pandemic world. If you have a menstrual bleed color that is very, very dark and clotty, I would want you to react to that with as much action as you would if you had an elevated temperature. And so does the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists. And I'm assuming that has now become a more globally accepted understanding that our cycles as women are so germane to our health overall.
I mean, and what a blessing to have this monthly indicator of health, really.
It's like a free hormone panel, right? You just have to look at it. And now with the advent of so many innovative new menstrual hygiene products, from cups to, there's discs, there's, actual, underwear. There's so many ways for you to see what it looks like. You've got many more options than ever before to find a product that helps you feel comfortable managing the flow and then using it, as a key piece of a health tracking.
Alisa, do you know what the percentage of women that have healthy menstrual cycles versus imbalanced menstrual cycles is?
What we do know is that about 47% of women are struggling with their hormones in general. That would certainly mean and include period issues, fertility issues, libido issues, thyroid issues. The reality is it's all connected, right? If you have a thyroid issue, it's going to affect your cycle. If you're having hormone imbalance with, let's say, insufficient progesterone, that's going to affect your cycle, your ovulation, your fertility. So it's really about which lens are we looking at. Most women are not concerned enough about their periods. They accept suffering. So typically, women get more inaction or activated when they want to do something with their period, like conceive, or they're struggling with perimenopause and they're trying to, relieve symptoms that plague them daily. But most women in their just adult menstruating years, if they're having debilitating cramps or, PMS or mid-cycle pain or acne, they accept that as quote unquote part of being a woman and having a period. And that's what I mean about how troublesome that is, because there was a very important study done about 15 years ago called the Biocycle study. And we know that just leaving PMS untreated during your reproductive years can increase dramatically the rate and the risk at which you will have the chance to develop the 4 big diseases of inflammation: heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and dementia. So we should not accept the suffering of our periods as quote unquote part of being a woman, because it does not hold water, right? All of those myths that pain is part of the story and cramps are normal, you've inherited them and there's nothing that you can do to make them better. You just have to suffer through until your period's over. All of these mythological, cultural pieces of that narrative hold women back and keep them passive from doing what they should do, which is, take immediate and massive action to resolve this, enormous set of biofeedback from the body that's letting you know that a lot of things are not working properly and are not being supported properly.
Want to look deeper into your own health? Our virtual naturopathic team help people all over the world to shift their health and their lives. We offer a 90-minute online discovery and diagnostic session where you can find out where you're at, why things are happening, and what you need to do about it. Everyone is an individual, and sometimes it can help to have someone break down your journey and see where you need to head next. To find out more, go to theshiftclinic.com and click on Clinic. Tell me, what is an infradian rhythm and what does it really mean for us as women?
We all know about the circadian rhythm, right? And we know how important it is. We know that if you don't take care of your circadian rhythm, you work the night shift for long periods of time, that it can have adverse effects on your health short term, your metabolism, your brain function, et cetera, right? And that long term, it can put you at greater risk for disease of inflammation. And there are 2 interesting things. We experience it in a 24-hour period of time, and that male hormonal patterns follow a circadian pattern, meaning they make all their testosterone while they're sleeping, and they have a daily 24-hour pattern of testosterone and cortisol peak levels and then low levels at night. And then they start over again, and they organize their fitness, their diet, and their work to take advantage of what's happening in their biology. Women at puberty have this second clock get activated, the infradian rhythm. And we experience that, yes, in our 28-day cycle. But like the circadian rhythm, which does not just govern your sleep-wake cycle, it governs so many more timings of different functions within the body. the infradian rhythm governs like your brain, your immune system, your stress response system, your metabolism, and your reproductive system. So what we're doing, however, is that we haven't been told about this rhythm, and we're applying the techniques that have been researched to optimize that 24-hour male hormonal pattern to our hormonal ecosystem. And it is causing us great disruption and exacerbating all of our health issues. So I think that it's a really exciting opportunity to have a fresh look at what is really going to move the needle for women to not just optimize their periods and their hormones, but, I'm somebody who, like I said, used to be obese. This is also about optimizing your fitness and your productivity, because this is sort of at the deepest level how the timing of your optimal performance works, and aligning with that just opens up every door and every possibility for you.
So tell me a bit more about specifically how does it work? Where are we noticing this? What body systems might it be working on? Can we dig into that stuff a little bit more? Because this is really fascinating.
Let's break down the metabolism piece and the fitness piece and the brain piece. And so we can really look at the three pillars of what you need to know. So, for example, one of the pieces of mythology that we have adopted from being left out of medical fitness and nutrition research is that women are smaller versions of men, and therefore we should simply just restrict calories a little bit more than whatever was found in the research for men. And we should increase fitness activities to compensate for our sluggish metabolism as compared to men. This is baseless and inaccurate. What we have is a completely different system. So you have these 4 phases of the cycle, as I mentioned: follicular, ovulatory, luteal, and menstrual. In the follicular and ovulatory phases, your metabolism is slightly slower relative to yourself, not relative to men, and your resting cortisol levels are slightly lower. Now, what this means is that you should eat slightly fewer calories relative to what's normal for you, and you should do your high-intensity interval training and cardiovascular focused workouts. Combining the right food and fitness to synchronize with the phases of your cycle, what's happening metabolically and stress response system wise, creates a scenario in which you use stored fat as fuel, and you build lean muscle, and you build energy. These are all things that we want. Then in the second half of your cycle, the luteal and the menstrual phase, your metabolism speeds up. It's been researched that you need 279 more calories per day. The problem is you haven't been doing that. You continue to try to restrict your calories because you believe you're supposed to eat the same caloric level every day, because that's what is optimizing male patterns, because they are, like I said, operating on a 24-hour clock. And that, of course, is logical. They would want to eat the same caloric load daily. But your metabolism shifts, but you haven't been told that. And so you want to eat more calories in the second half of the cycle. In addition, your resting cortisol levels are higher. And what this means is that the studies show you must not do high-intensity interval training or heavy cardio. And so if you do what's optimal, which is to eat more calories and to focus on slow burning calories, obviously, and then you also focus on strength training without a cardio component, you create an optimal environment to build lean muscle, burn fat as fuel, and boost your energy, right? And you disrupt no hormones. But what you do instead, of course, is that you try to maintain the same caloric level daily during this phase. And you try to do the same high intensity workouts or run or do your cardio. And what the effect is it exacerbates adrenal stress. It disrupts insulin levels. It suppresses progesterone production, which during the luteal phase is the thing that opposes estrogen to prevent PMS symptoms. So now you're creating a scenario in which you are suppressing progesterone, and you'll become estrogen dominant and have all of those PMS symptoms. And you can disrupt ovulation for the next cycle and decrease your fertility, decrease energy, and increase brain fog, which is what we accept as normal, but it is abnormal. And we're doing it to ourselves by not knowing about the infradian rhythm and trying to take care of ourselves as if we're smaller versions of men. So those are some, on the food and fitness metabolism side. And this is something that the U.S. women's soccer team is using to train their female athletes. This is the only way forward for women to really take care of themselves, because again, it's finally, we're basing our diet, our fitness, our self-care on our actual biology, not assumptions that have been proven to be untrue based on our, being left out of research. So in the book, in the FLO, I unpack the Infradian rhythm and explain all of these pieces, but I also make this something that's really easy for you to follow. So I created a method called the cycle syncing method. There's a chart for the food, there's a chart for the workouts, there's a chart for, what's happening with your brain and what you should focus on at work. There's a chart for how to make motherhood less stressful based on where you are in your cycle. There's a chart to biohack your orgasm based on which phase of the cycle you're in, so you can optimize that for your health and well-being, because 67% of women are sexually unsatisfied, which is unacceptable. So everything is laid out for you. Each chapter of the book has a chart to help you really start to support your Infradian rhythm with the cycle syncing method.
So one of our episodes, we're talking about sexuality, we're talking about orgasm, we're talking about, what does this mean for women? What's important? What's your view of the state of women's sexual health and anything that's involved in that?
I want everything for women. When we look at it through the lens of the statistic that 67% of women are sexually unsatisfied, that to me is at a crisis level. And again, we accept that as something that we should tolerate, just as we've been conditioned to accept menstrual pain and whatever condition we have, we're stuck with for life. We've been taught to accept substandard experiences. What you need to know is that your sexual desire and your sexual response is affected by this Infradian rhythm. And you have different times of the cycle where you are more naturally interested in sex from a physiological center point, and other times where you need to use your other big sex organ, your brain, to help your body become interested in sex. And that's sort of like how we work the desire side of things. And so you'll obviously want to modulate which activities you're doing to, quote unquote, initiate the whole process. And then on the sexual response side, the actual climax, or what's more important, the orgasmic plateau side, the stage of arousal before you reach climax, where you get the maximum amount of benefits from a health point of view and a hormonal point of view, that piece as well, depending on which phase of the cycle you're in, you're either in a dry phase or a self-lubricating phase. If you're in a dry phase, you should not judge yourself. So many women judge themselves thinking, oh, gee, why am I not getting lubricated right away? Something's wrong with me. What's wrong with me? Nothing's wrong with you. What's wrong is that you've been deprived of an education about how your response patterns work. And so therefore you judge and feel critical when they are not the same every day. You see, this is the whole problem. The whole problem is that the standard in our culture is sameness, because that's how it works for men. But you are dynamic. You have 4 patterns to contend with. They have their patterns, but they just happen very quickly in the day, in one day period. You have 4 patterns throughout the month. And so understanding that is just so empowering and liberating. Always be reaching for your maximum pleasure because it's so good for you health-wise. But also we have to appreciate the different nuances of what will get us to our results, but that we should not accept anymore this kind of malaise of thinking, oh, sometimes it's like fireworks and sometimes it's flat and I have no idea why and I'm in the dark. That does not have to be the case anymore. There's a whole chart. I think it's chapter 8. You can learn about your process and then just biohack your orgasm.
What are the hormonal and health benefits of orgasm?
So many. I always joke when people ask me, like, what supplement would you take to a deserted island? I would say my clitoris and some lube, because the benefits of the orgasmic plateau and maximizing the production of your nitric oxide and oxytocin are just so well documented and multivariate, in the sense that you can protect your heart improve your brain function, improve your immune response, improve collagen production, slow down hormonal aging, regulate ovulation, protect the tissues of the reproductive organs, the vulva, the vaginal canal. There are so many benefits. It pays off long-term and short-term to ensure that you are having the maximum amount of pleasure that your 8,000 nerve endings can generate.
What would you say to a client that isn't orgasming, or not very often, perhaps?
I would say that most women have not had a positive experience of penetrative sex. And a lot of women have not had the experience of having had enough foreplay to reach full engorgement. Again, we hold the male standard as the only standard. And so men's erections can take place anywhere from 30 to 60 seconds. They reach full engorgement really, really quickly. Women reach full engorgement between 30 and 40 minutes. So if you have not done 30 to 40 minutes of clitoral stimulation and other erogenous zones stimulation to reach full engorgement of your vaginal canal, then you have not given yourself the opportunity to be fully orgasmic or to enjoy penetrative sex if that's what you're doing. From the vantage point of clitoral stimulation, I think we also go about that in ways that are not as optimal. So, for example, we overvalue climax, or if we pace sensation from orgasm to climax from 0 to 10, you want to stay in the pocket of, a 4 and an 8 from the orgasmic plateau stage. Once you cross past the 8, and you're quickly going to want to get to that 10, that's when you're climaxing, and that's when the nerve endings need to have their refractory period and recover before you can have your next experience. We rush to climax because we overvalue it, again, because that goal-oriented sex from the male point of view is really ejaculation focused, which is where they receive their maximum pleasure dose. And our process is different. You can receive your maximum pleasure dose along the whole orgasmic plateau process and also have a climax. So I think it's that we just don't appreciate how our bodies work, that we are comparing ourselves to the male process that we've internalized. And I think when we use vibrators, we really blow past orgasmic plateau and go right to climax, which does you no favors, puts you out of the game for a little while because you have to go to that refractory period and have the nerve endings calm down. And you don't get all the benefits of full engorgement with, all of the tissues of the vulva and the vagina. And of course, if you're not using lubricant and you're in a dry phase, it's not going to feel good. And I also want to just say on the last note here with this, for women who feel like they're not reaching that experience, that, nature is in fact a bell curve. And there are outlier experiences where the vast majority of women in that bell curve are designed to experience clitoral orgasms as their main source of pleasure. Vaginal orgasms are not necessarily something that's supposed to happen. It can happen for some women. It can happen the more you go through the engorgement process, but it's not necessarily the whole focus for you. The sexual focus should be on clitoral stimulation. The real benefit is not the climax piece. It's that all the sensation leading up to that you can generate in your body.
I think putting it like that, that it's very goal orientated rather than what kind of experience are you wanting with your partner or with yourself for that matter? Is it about just getting that kind of quick orgasm, or is it about that connection and taking it slow and really exploring, which I think is completely opposite to what our culture shows us, as you were talking about. What I would love to know is, how can women get in the flow more?
Well, like I said, you want to really start, engaging the cycle syncing method. So, pick up the book, learn about the Infradian rhythm, start synchronizing your food with the phase of the cycle that you're in, You want to synchronize your fitness, and then you can dive deeper when you feel comfortable with that and add in the third pillar of the cycle syncing method, which is the time management piece that's mapped onto the brain changes that you experience over the course of the cycle. If that feels like overwhelming, I've also put together, a couple of things that make that really easy for you. So there's the cycle syncing membership, where you get grocery lists and meal plans and recipes specific to each phase and workout videos. So I've taken all the guesswork out of it for you. And then also, if you're just feeling like, gee, I don't even know which phase of the cycle I'm in, which a lot of us feel disconnected from, you can download the FLO tracker that has a circle icon that looks the same as the circle on the cover of the book in the FLO. And it's the only cycle syncing method app. So it will help you learn which phase of the cycle you're in, and it will tell you what you should be focusing on, from food to fitness to sex and relationships to work for that phase, so that you don't have to become encyclopedic like I am about your period, but you can use these tools to make supporting your infradian rhythm and taking care of your cycle just very, very simple.
Can I ask a huge favour? If you like this podcast, the very best thing that you can do to support us is to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or a rating on Spotify. This will help to push us up in the charts, which gets us into the ears of more people just like you that are also trying to make their shift. The shift! What's the biggest bit of misinformation that you've seen regarding women's health and these type of things?
Oh, I think we've talked about a lot of the myths from the period point of view. I think, just that pain and suffering and there's no way out, those are all myths that you need to discard immediately. If you have a period problem or a hormonal problem, it's your body's cry for help. It's directly related to the degree of disruption to your infradian rhythm. Get into action, start using the cycle syncing method, and just watch your body recover. It's pretty immediate. From a fitness and diet point of view, the mythology is, that women have slightly sluggish metabolisms compared to men and store more fat, and therefore we have to eat less and work out more, which is also completely false and very toxic mythology that leads to a lot of eating issues and body issues and, just a fight with the self on a fundamental level, when this can all just be like a bad dream, so to speak, of how you used to take care of yourself once you understand how your biology is working, and that it is just so distinct from men. You don't even want to do any sort of comparison or utilize any of the same techniques. You want to just do what is in alignment and in synchrony with your hormones. And then I would say a third one too is the success myths. There are these age-old, unquestioned, time-honored success coaching, standards, right? Like, wake up early, the early bird gets the worm. It goes back to the ancient Greeks, right? All men who are writing these books, and do all your deep work in the morning and do the same workout at the same, like this ritualistic behavior of doing the same things at the same time each and every day, and not having any flexibility with that schedule. That is also really damaging for women, because we then hold ourselves to this standard of sameness, that we equate perfection with being able to maintain sameness. And that is fundamentally really problematic for you, because you are not the same day in and day out. And believing that you should be really would require you to really deeply disconnect from who you are, which is, that's psychologically problematic on many, many levels, and can lead to a lot of self-criticism and feeling like you're always struggling and comparing yourself to others. And so I think on a psychological level as well, the impact, so we have our period level, the actual physical problems, we have sort of the food and fitness, are sort of just our well-being in general from a metabolic point of view. And then we have the psychological impact of, not having our infradian rhythm included into conventional, successful living tips. Instead, everything is held to that male standard. And so therefore, whether we think that or not, whether we connect the dots that this is a male standard or what optimizes male biology, we do see it as the ideal is to somehow strive for that sameness every day, that's what is perfect. And in order for us to do that, we have to deny absolutely everything that is fundamental to how we function and who we are as females, which I think is really, really damaging.
If you could give advice to a young developing woman, so let's say a, 10, 12-year-old, or even young teenager, what would it be?
Oh, I would just let her, this is what I'm going to say to my daughter. Yeah. Listen, in a few years, you're 9, 10, 11, right? In a year or 2 or 3, something pretty extraordinary is going to happen inside of your body. This biological clock is going to get activated. Right now, you operate with a single clock like everybody else. It's circadian. You experience it over the course of a day. When you hit a certain moment in your development, this second clock called an Infradian clock is going to wake up, and it's going to have you shift from feeling the same every day to having this dynamic 4-pattern experience over the course of a month. And it's going to give you extra charged abilities in each of those phases with your creativity, with your focus, with your energy, and you'll learn how to harness that week over week to be even more extraordinary than you are today. And that's what I would say to somebody who's 9, 10, 11. I wouldn't even really talk about periods yet because it hasn't happened. And the first conversation should be about what's going to happen to moving out of a feeling like you're the same every day to feeling different weekly and how that's an advantage. And then maybe a year later or 6 months later, whenever it feels right, then talk about one of the things that's going to happen is that you will experience this bleed. Another thing that's going to happen is this metabolism shift. You need to eat differently. You really break down all the different effects that it will have and explain that to her and get her excited about not only this gift that she's going to get, but also that she's responsible to take care of it and that there's a pattern of that self-care that she should begin engaging in as soon as she starts cycling.
Wonderful. One last question for you. If you could give just one piece of advice to someone that wanted to make a shift in their health or their life, what would it be?
If you're in your reproductive years, the one thing I would want you to start doing is using the cycle syncing method, because it will yield the biggest shift in your health and your life overall with the least amount of effort.
So wonderful. Alisa Vitti, thank you so much for joining me today on The Shift.
It's been my pleasure, Katherine. Thank you for having me.
There was so much gold in that episode. Let's review some of the key points and what action you can take as a result of this. Your period is a powerful biomarker of your health. The colour of the blood, length and amount of flow, and the symptoms you get around this time are all clues to your health status. It is considered your 5th vital sign of health, and it should not be ignored. We know from statistics that over 40% of women are struggling with their hormones right now. This is a huge number. Research shows that if you've got PMS that's untreated during your reproductive years, it can dramatically increase your risk of developing the big 4 diseases: heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and dementia. Women have an infradian rhythm. This is the rhythm in which our hormones cycle from month to month. We can use this infradian rhythm to our advantage, and when it is out of whack, it can cause us significant grief. Learning is great, but action is better. Here's a few things that you can do as a result of this conversation in order to help you shift your health and your life. First of all, start tracking your period. Alisa's FLO app is one of the best out there. I'd recommend downloading it and starting to look at some of these patterns. You want to record your blood loss, how it looks, any pain, and any other symptoms that you experience throughout your cycle. Listen to your body when it comes to the different times of your cycle. If you feel like hibernating at certain times, this can be normal. And if you need to rest, that's okay too. I'd recommend Alisa's book for more on this. If you have symptoms around your cycle, see a naturopath or other allied health professional to help. You'd be surprised at how little knowledge most doctors have about the menstrual cycle, so find someone that works in this area that can help you to navigate it. Our naturopaths at the Shift Clinic help patients worldwide with menstrual issues every day. You can download our cycle tracking guide for free at theshiftclinic.com/links. A huge thank you to Alisa Vitti for her passion and knowledge. I know she has helped thousands of women, and I hope that you can make a shift from listening to this episode today too. If you like this episode, please let us know by sharing on social media and tagging Alisa and myself, Katherine Maslen, or the Shift Clinic, so that we can hear what you have to say. You can find out more about Alisa on her website, FLO Living, FLOLiving.com, or check her out on Instagram. In the next episode of the Shift Expert series, we have Tara Stiles. Tara is the founder of Strala Yoga and uses a unique approach to healing that involves yoga, Tai Chi, and traditional Chinese and Japanese medicine. I loved her approach to healing, and I know you will too, so make sure you tune in.
Coming up on The Shift.
So you feel like you're accomplishing something because you're accomplishing getting really good at tolerating feeling bad. Feels to me like what a lot of us kind of collectively want right now is to feel better in the process while we're getting better. We all want to be vulnerable, but we want to also control it too. We want to control the narrative and tell the story. Softness is really the thing that makes everything possible. You know, a tree is not freaking out when the breeze comes by. The tree is strong because it has the ability to be moved by the wind.
This series is a production of the Shift Clinic. Hosted by Katherine Maslen. Music and sound design by Shade Furlong. Thank you to all of our experts. For more details on them, go to theshiftclinic.com.
We can be. We must be.
The first generation to end extreme poverty.
The generation most determined to fight injustice
and inequality.
The generation that saves the planet
from climate change.
And this is how we will get it done.
The global goals.
A 15-year plan for everyone, everywhere.
With no one left behind.
The global goals are a framework that collectively help us
support the health of our people
and the planet.
At Shift, we are ambassadors for the global goals.
This project supports global goal number 6.
Clean water and sanitation.
Every time you listen
to an episode of The Shift,
we provide a day's access to clean water
for a human in need
in Malawi, Africa.
Water is the foundation to health, and we believe
every human should have access
to clean, healthy water.
So please share this podcast wide
and keep tuning in
so we can impact those who need it the most.